I ran across a really fascinating trap in the chameleon Slav, and I wanted to share it here and discuss it a bit. I just found it really interesting, and I found it hard to believe that so many people fall into it. So I wanted to kind of explore that a little bit. So the trap spins off of the main tabia of the Chebanenko Slav or chameleon Slav, which is this position right here. So A6 is the defining move of the chameleon Slav, also known as the Chebanenko Slav. And I set this, filtered this lichess database to players of 2,000 and 2,200 strength. And interestingly, the third most common move in this position here is bishop to g5. And that's not considered a good move among like super grandmasters. I think it was played back in the very early days of the chameleon Slav, but it's not the best attempt by white, but it is fairly common at club level. And I think part of the reason is that in other Slav variations, whether you play like a semi-Slav or a proper Slav, bishop to g5 is often played. And I think what happens is when black doesn't take the c4 pawn, white feels like they don't have to play a4 to hold on to the pawn without falling a pawn behind. And a lot of times then they just move on with one of their other plans, which is bishop to g4. So let me get to the actual trap here, which is really interesting. So one way for black to respond to this bishop to g5 is just to play knight to e4, and that's fine. But I think a more testing way is to take the c pawn, d takes c4, and what that does is it threatens to play b5 and hold on to that pawn. So if white isn't real familiar with this Chebanenko Slav or chameleon Slav, they may play e3 or e4. We can see e4 is actually the most common move, and when they do that, we just play to hang on to that pawn. And I'm not going to cover those lines here or anything because the point is to show this interesting trap. But your stronger players will probably play a4 here, realizing that they need to contest this b5 square and they need to recuperate or recoup this pawn on c4. They don't want to fall behind in material. And what black can do here is play h6 and force the bishop to make a decision where either they take on f6, in which case, we got a bishop for a knight, or it looks like 50% of the time they choose, between just taking the knight and playing back to h4. And this is the line where the trap comes in. And it's actually a really interesting line overall. White, black plays b5. And what's interesting is black is willing to accept an exchange sacrifice. And I'll go through how that works. White plays this knight takes b5. And they think, aha, I'm winning this exchange. I'm I'm keeping my rook and only losing a minor piece. And this is actually, you can see the evaluation here. This is more than adequate compensation for black. It's actually stronger for black. But this is the way that this is the line I plan on playing if they play bishop to g5. And where this trap comes about is two ways it can come about. Let's look at when black plays e6. What happens is, you can see here, 90% of the time, white plays e3. And in this position, it's already very strong for black. But black plays bishop to g4. And this is the part that I find really fascinating, and even more so in another variation that we'll look at next. But white plays knight to d2 91% of the time. So just kind of take a look at that and see if you can see what the problem with that move is. Pause the video if you want. But after knight to d2, we have this move g5 hitting this bishop. And when the bishop moves away, we have knight to e4. And this is just completely winning. We're going to win this piece on d2. And what I find really interesting is that if we look at this database, in this position right here, well, at least king to e2, yeah, white is worse, but at least they're not losing a piece. But on players where we have it filtered to have all players over 2,000, 90% of the time, they play knight to d2 and walk right into this trap. And I find that very, very perplexing. So I wanted to kind of like try to wrap my head around that a bit. The other move order that this could come out of is, instead of playing e6, black, of course, could just play g5 right here. And this I find even more fascinating. If we look at the amount that this is played, in this position here, they still play e3 76% of the time. But more fascinating is that after black plays bishop to b4 check here, white still plays knight to d2 83% of the time. They walk into this trap 83% of the time. I've never really I've never come across like a trap like this before, that so many players of decent level strength fall into. Like, if you put this as a tactical problem and you filtered it for the same player strength, you only presented it to players over 2,000 on lichess, I would think at least 85% of those people would solve this problem and realize that after knight to d2, we have knight to e4 and it loses. And so they would come up with the fact that they just have to suck it up and play king to e2 here. So it got me thinking, because to me, this is even, in this position right here, it's easier to see than in the one where our pawn is on g7 and the bishop is on h4, because I could see missing this threat of g5, hitting the bishop and freeing, unpinning the knight from the queen so that the knight can go to e4. I can see that, but like this position right here, I have a very hard time understanding how 84% of the players, 83 actually percent of the players over 2,000 walk right into this. And so my thought is I recently did a video on like the brain, specifically like the aging brain, and how you can have like these conceptual blindness where you just don't see like these obvious things. And I think that might be part of it. But if we look at this opening, I think the Chebanenko itself plays into it, because I think what happens is, if you look at it here, the Chebanenko is only played 10% of the time when people, by black players that go into the Slav formation. And so white doesn't have a lot of experience against this. They may have never actually even faced it before. And when we play a6, I think what happens is you might kind of bring cognitive biases into the picture. Like, I think they think, oh man, this guy is playing passively. He's just playing pawn to rook 3. He probably, he probably like sucks at tactics. He just wants to be like bunkered in and avoid anything where I might play my knight or my bishop here to b5. And so I think like they start to become overconfident. And then what happens as we roll along, they probably don't realize that this exchange sacrifice is actually good for black. So they roll into this and they're like, oh my God, this guy, like, I thought he might have sucked after he played pawn to rook 3, after he played a6. He does suck. Look at this. He just gives up this exchange. This is great. And so the opponent is in this mental state of mind where they think, oh, this guy sucks. I'm winning. And so you got like this overconfidence bias enhanced by this confirmation bias when black, quote unquote, loses the exchange. And then I think it's even further enhanced when we get this bishop to b4, because I think they think, oh yeah, this guy, he's lashing out now. He lost this material. He's lashing out. Duffer sees check, gives check, and it's not even on their radar. They're like, oh well, fine. If he wants to, if he wants to take my knight here, I'm happy to trade off pieces when I'm ahead in material. Well, it's not obviously not what we have in mind, because we have this in mind. So it's kind of a pleasant surprise to come across. I find it really fascinating from a psychological perspective. That's something I'm going to try to study a little bit more. I'm trying to study, the learning process for aging players. But this is just kind of an added little benefit of this chameleon Slav. Like, I have noticed that I've had actually more kind of quick victories playing the Scandinavian defense than when I used to play the Sicilian or the Caro-Kann. And I think part of it is this false sense of security for the opponent. They think you're this passive player. They kind of let their guard down, and they end up making they're walking into some kind of tactical problem. And like, this is the same kind of thing. We're playing our solid restraint structure. They're thinking, this person is like hunkered back. They can't come and get me real quickly. They suck. They just, they wasted a move with this pawn to a6 because they don't understand the point of it. And then they think, oh my God, he blundered this exchange. And so I find this really interesting. And I stumbled across this when I was preparing a video, or studying for myself and preparing to make a video on this exchange sacrifice line, because that's the line I'm gonna play if people play this early bishop to g5. So if you're interested in watching any of those videos, I'm doing a series on understanding the Slav. I'll put a link above me here that you can click to a video that just kind of explains how to best make use of that video series, and then I'll put a link at the end to the playlist of the video series. It's something that I'm going to be making quite a bit of number of videos on it over time, and I have like an index, a lichess study that's indexed to the different videos. So if you're interested in a particular variation, you can go through that. But anyway, I hope you found that interesting like I did. I find it completely fascinating because it's just, I can't believe 83% of players over 2,000 on here fall for a tactic that's basically one move away. It's just kind of unbelievable. So anyway, have a good one. Take care.